Today on Fund Indie Films, we are talking to Sam Muirhead of the Year of Open Source project. Sam, would you like to explain a little bit about it?
Yeah, I'm just about to. I'm just starting right now in a year-long project to basically try and adapt the ideas of open source software to various other areas of life, which people have been working on for years and years and years. People are starting to make hardware and tools and equipment that basically they allow people to see the inner workings of, the plans of, and they kind of share those with other people to allow modification. And I'm kind of taking that idea, trying it out in basically everything that I use, all the products, all the services, and seeing where it fits, where it doesn't, and making videos about that throughout the year.
What are some of the benefits you think that applying open source principles to various other parts of regular everyday life? Where do you think that there are some really good untapped benefits, and where do you think there's maybe some challenges with that?
I think there's certainly a lot of challenges with a lot of the services that exist. For example, just things like kind of internet access, cell phone services, those kind of things. I think I'm really going to struggle there simply because it's very difficult to build your own cell phone provider. If it's just me with one cell phone, then it's going to be very difficult for me to communicate to other people. But what I do think is very interesting is just the way that open source kind of methods allow sharing of information, and a lot of the time people in whatever area they're working in around the world, they're kind of having to reinvent the wheel, having to do exactly the same working thought process that somebody else in another place is doing on a very similar job. But because they're not sharing this information, because they're not kind of making it easier for everybody by putting it out there and allowing other people to use it, then it's wasting time, it's inefficient, and it's leaving less time for creativity and more time with simply computational kind of things and complicated daily works.
Okay, so outside of this project, what's your background?
My background's actually in music videos. I started at a music television station a number of years ago, and through that I went through kind of all sorts of different television jobs in New Zealand in post-production, working on news, working on some awful reality television, working on Power Rangers of all things, all sorts of things like that. And then here in Berlin, I've been based in Berlin for the last 3 years or so, almost 3 years, and I've mostly been working with a small documentary production company called Film. And so this is quite a very kind of lively social group of people. It's relatively kind of low-budget organization, but it's people who have a real enthusiasm for documentaries and for storytelling and things like that. So it's a very international crew as well. We've got mostly kind of a mix of German and English-speaking and Spanish-speaking people, and then all sorts of other nationalities thrown into the mix as well. And so different areas of expertise, backgrounds, and all sorts of things like that. So it's a fascinating place to work.
Cool. So what are the challenges going to be for you in adopting sort of open source to every aspect of your lifestyle? What do you think is going to be the hardest aspect?
I'm not too sure what's going to be the hardest, but it's going to be something that's going to be kind of on my mind every time I step out of the door, every time I consider buying a new product or just going to the supermarket. I'll be thinking about, hang on a minute, is this something that's traditionally copyrighted, or what's the licensing issues on this particular product and things like that. I'll be becoming very, very familiar with patent law and what is public domain and things like that. But I know filmmaking traditionally is not a very open source area of the world. I mean, it's all very kind of, it's using proprietary products, it's using proprietary software. There's very, very little open source about the way that we make films. So I'm really going to be kind of experimenting with that an awful lot this year.
Yeah, that's been kind of an interesting thing I've been noticing. For instance, are you familiar with the film Sita Sings the Blues? by
I've
Nina
heard about.
Paley.
I still haven't seen it, but that will be one of the first ones I watch in the next couple of weeks because I can't go to the movies and watch normal films, unfortunately, unless they're released under Creative Commons licenses. So that one sounds like an interesting one.
Yeah, it's a delightful little film. It's not for everybody, but I first saw it at Ebert Fest because film critic Roger Ebert loved it, and I saw it and was like, whoa, this is awesome and hilarious and all that. But one of the things that struck me was that even though she did eventually make a Creative Commons, and then a few months after I asked her about it, stuttering all the way at Ebert Fest, she actually released all of the source files to it. But even those, they're stuck in Adobe Flash Professional format. So a lot of people who would want to make use of it, unless they're willing to spend hundreds of dollars or otherwise acquire Adobe Flash Professional, they can't do anything with it. And so that's kind of a real shame. Video editing, until this point, there haven't really been good professional grade editors out there that are open source, and probably the one place that I've seen a lot of progress going back years in the open source world is Blender, and they've done some pretty excellent stuff. I don't know if you've been following with the Blender Foundation short films.
Yeah, I've been watching a few of them. Some of them look very, very impressive indeed. So it's going to be, but it seems that some people also use Blender not just for kind of 3D animation and so, but also people are using it for editing as well. So I don't know how well that works and if that works particularly well, but I'd like to kind of get my hands on it and try it out as well.
Yeah, in my experience, Blender, great for animation, great for compositing. You could totally switch out After Effects for Blender. The editing, it works, although I think it's you can really tell that that wasn't designed as its main purpose. So it always takes me a lot longer to try and cut anything in it, but it does work. I think that's one place is the editing aspect is really where getting a tool that's really fast to use and all that is quite important. We can talk about that a bit later because I can kind of guess that we have a lot to talk about there. But first, I'd like to ask you about you've been talking about open source cameras and things like that, really going very far with that. Would you like to talk a little bit about that and what you'll probably be doing?
So in terms of hardware that's available for filmmaking, one of the only areas that is quite kind of advanced is things like camera rigs. For example, if you go to Instructables.com or if you go to Thingiverse or something like that, this is this making community where people are sharing designs. They're sharing. You've got got your own.
Yep. Let me see if I can put it together on the fly here. But yeah, keep talking.
So on these kind of websites, basically it's people who have adapted rigs for their own purposes, or they've designed something that really suits them, suits their style of working, and then they're sharing the design with other people afterwards. So it means that rather than me having to go to a store and look at the kind of 2 or 3 different rigs available there for exorbitant prices that aren't necessarily designed for my camera or my shooting style, it's a way of ensuring that you can always have exactly what you need to exactly suit your specifications.
Well, I think a couple of the bits to put it together are in a.
I'm very, very excited about this creation you're assembling just outside of the picture frame.
It's nothing too special, but given the price and what it's done for me, it's I'm happy with it. And I found the instructions for it online. Have no clue what licensing the instructions are under, but yeah, I'm sort of missing the T-joint and the screw head here, but Well, I'll show you what it basically
Uh-huh.
is. So you got this weight here, and then have a T-joint
Mm-hmm.
that you'll have that, and there's a little contraption that I've got that kind of has a standard screw head
Yeah.
there, and for you know $40, I had two Steadicams.
Very nice. Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And as you mentioned, you don't really know what license it's under. I think the licensing is very important, but what's more important is the intention, that people are sharing their designs with other people and encouraging them to use them and modify them.
Yeah,
Um,
it was just somebody, hey, here's instructions on how to make this. And of course, I didn't have one of the tools that they were wanting you to have in order to put it together. So I actually bought a slightly different connector part at the end that would avoid me having to drill through steel.
yeah. Cool. And what I found interesting as well is that now this idea of using open source hardware to change the way that films are made is now being found in other areas. I mean, there's the Apertus camera project, for example. This is a group of people, I think it's mostly Europe-based, a few people who have adapted the Alpha camera, which is an open source hardware camera that originally was just kind of made for as a security camera, I think, or for adaptation for various other purposes, and they've kind of worked out ways of changing the hardware, changing the firmware, and adapting it for cinema use. And they're almost about to release a version of this commercially. At the moment, it's just been kind of, since over the last few years, they've been developing this, experimenting and working out what works and what doesn't, and they're pretty close to releasing an actual working model. So I'm going to be going down to Austria to meet with one of the founders of this and having a play with his camera and seeing kind of how it all works and what the possibilities of having a camera that's more kind of open for modification for people to experiment and show their creativity.
Now, what camera have you been using up till now?
I've been using the 5D, Canon 5D, so that of course is not a open source camera, so that's another reason why I really want to get my hands on Apertus and see how it works.
Is that the Mark II that you have, or the Mark I? Yeah, I love that camera. I couldn't quite afford it, but right beside me, I've got my 60D with the Thrifty 50 on it.
Yeah.
Which I'd actually like to hear your thoughts on those, because they aren't open source, in terms of the hardware sense, or their core firmware, but there's a project called Magic Lantern that basically extends the firmware's features. And so people have kind of taken a closed tool and, opened it up as far as adding some levels of functionality.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good precedent for just the idea that just because you've got a product which doesn't necessarily encourage you to open it up, to play with it, to adapt it, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't or that you couldn't. There are all sorts of people who do amazing work in terms of firmware hacks, hardware hacks, changing things around and playing with the camera to make it more like the camera they want, or a camera more suited to their needs. So kind of taking that open source idea and applying it to proprietary products.
Yeah, so it's like I said, probably be like having like a open source file browser on top of Microsoft Windows.
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and nothing wrong with that, but you're still stuck with Windows.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with the open source hardware, do you have any ideas what you might do, given that the hardware itself is freely tweakable?
With this, I'm hoping to take advantage of some of the people here in Berlin who can hopefully help me out, because Berlin is really an amazing city to be in if you're interested in tech and open source and IT, and there's a great making community here. People kind of developing all sorts of amazing gadgets and things like that. And so, for example, every Monday there's a camera hacking workshop, hacking meeting at a hacking club just around the corner from me. So I'm hoping to get in touch with some of those guys and work out ways that we can basically turn my camera into a bit of a Franken camera in a way. So yeah, it should be quite fun, I think.
That does sound like it. I'm a bit of a camera geek, so that sounds immensely fun. But yeah, so perhaps now we should maybe turn a little bit to the editing side of things. You have a background as an editor, so what have you used in the past? What do you see as your needs for editing as you go through this project?
Well, I'm a Mac user. I edit with Final Cut, but I'm not a Mac user necessarily by choice, but more by default, simply because when I didn't go to film school to learn how to edit and learn how to work on films and things like that, I simply learned on the job, and the job where I learned had Final Cut running, and they had Macs, and so basically that was how I kind of learned about it, and then from there on, I just continued to get various jobs, working with Macs, working with Final Cut, and things like that. And so it's the system I know best, and the system that I'm best at working with. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I absolutely adore everything about Macs or Final Cut. There's all sorts of problems with it, all sorts of problems with the way that I mean, it's a huge program, and it's developed with certain particular people in mind, but it's also got a lot of kind of leftovers from the film and television days, which aren't necessarily applicable to people like you and me who are shooting on Canon DSLRs, who aren't working with tape, with broadcast standards, those kind of things, who are more using a more simplified setup and a digital workflow. And it also doesn't really incorporate the kind of changes that we've seen happen in all sorts of other areas of work, with online collaborative editing, with working kind of spread around the world and things like that. So that's something that where I think the open source world does have a little bit to offer. So I'm planning on trying out a couple of different open source NLEs as I go through the year. So I'm kind of keenly watching the development of Lightworks, which is the EditShare software, which is an established NLE, and they're planning to bring it up open source, but it's not open source yet. So I'll just wait and see what happens there, and then try it out later in the year if it does go that way. But I am quite interested also in NovaCut. So NovaCut, one that you're very, very familiar with, of course. NovaCut is of particular interest to me as well, basically because it is something that is designed kind of with this workflow in mind, and it's also something that is kind of, rather than just taking Avid or Final Cut as a starting point and then trying to develop a clone, it seems to be going in a slightly different direction and finding its own ways of developing. So, for example, there's two things in particular, dmedia, of course, making a streamlined way of bringing files into the system and organizing files, and also the online collaborative editing as well. So using the cloud to its advantages and being able to basically have proxies or other video files online so that people can edit it in different locations. So I think that's really, really exciting and something that could definitely work for example, for Wrangle Film, my particular documentary organization.
Great. It seems like you've you've been really researching us, and you've done the whole pitch and spiel for that, and we're really glad that while we may not be able to meet all of your editing needs quite yet, because we're still fairly early in development, but we definitely want to see you trying out and testing it and using it for some of your videos, as much as our current features allow. And we by the way, audience, I'm a NovaCut developer on this with this sort of side by side, but yeah, we're really glad to have you testing it out and using it for your videos, and talking to us about what's working for you, what are sort of the most important things that you still need, and sort of really working with you on making sure that NovaCut is a really great tool for you, because you are really one of our target users. You edit professionally, and you're doing so independently, and you want to collaborate with other people on your videos and so forth. Which we're really looking forward to seeing how you make use of that, and sort of the benefits and all that of the collaborative editing process.
Yeah. Well, I'm quite interested, for example, with Vranglefilm, this documentary organization. It's we've got this huge group of different people. Some of them are very new to editing, some of them are more experienced, but we don't have kind of many full-timers. It's kind of most people are just there 1 or 2 days a week, and it's very difficult to keep everybody on track in terms of what's been done on a project, which hard drive different files are on, and things like that. So Final Cut isn't quite meeting our needs in that kind of way. And so it is really interesting hearing about ideas to basically try and streamline that process, try and make it so that there's more kind of ease of organization of all of these files, and basically allowing people to come into a project and do some work on it from a different computer or from a different place, and still work on the same footage, and basically be able to work out what's been done on it since last time they came and saw the project, what kind of stage the project is on. So, yeah, an interesting development.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. For viewers who are just kind of hearing about this for the first time, I'm gonna try and do something a little bit cool for you. I have NovaCut running in another workspace on this computer, so I'm going to show you what we're talking about with the collaborative editing and how it looks different from your Avid or your Final Cuts or whatnot. Sound good? All right, so screen share. And share. And, okay, so here's the NovaCut main screen, where you have different projects that you're working on. And so I click on a project, and so here's a current edit in progress. You got your doodle area here where you can kind of put clips before you're quite ready to assemble them in a sequence. And below right here is the sequence view. This is the storyboard view is what we call it. And so you have a sequence of clips with starting frame and ending frame each, and you can reorder like this, and you can change the starting and ending points in the clip just by scrolling. So that's what we've got here. And if I start up a second instance of NovaCut, this is going to be basically simulating the same thing as if it was across the world. Alright, so then I go to the same project, and as you can see, this is the same exact edit, but I can make changes on either side, and it updates the other one in real time. Alright, and so that's just a quick little demo of sort of that collaborative workflow. So you'd be able to, each person would be seeing the same project, but be getting updates like that. Anyway,
yeah, it's very, very exciting.
Yep. So we don't have all sorts of audio editing features or anything like that, but we do have basic cutting workflow in that, and what we're trying to do is, rather than focus on having a lot of features, just the ones that we focus on that professionals need is figuring out a better way to do them that saves time and helps people work together.
It's and I mean the open source system as well is just I really like the fact that with open source software there is this kind of a development team is a lot more open to collaboration from or input from its users as well. I know once again from Final Cut when they released Final Cut X, for example, there were huge numbers of people who were kind of infuriated with the changes. Many of the pro users felt that they turned their backs on them and things like that. And their only kind of method of protest of trying to do anything about it was just complaining. Basically, there was no other kind of real avenue for making changes. Whereas with an open source system, with an open source workflow, there's a lot more. It's a lot easier to kind of that input is really facilitated. It's really kind of set up for input from users, for people to kind of point out problems, to suggest fixes, and there are ways to give constructive criticism and things like that. This is also, I mean, because it's with open source software, in extreme cases, if you find that it's going kind of the wrong direction, you can dive on in there with development, or you can even take the project as it is and fork it, make your own offshoot of the project. So this means that any kind of development team is always very open to input and to suggestions from others, which I think is really interesting. And as you say, like this particular project is in a relatively early stage as well, and so a lot of the times from a project I'm going to be looking at where open source projects are or how far the kind of the open source version or option has come in a certain particular area. But even if it's in a relatively young stage, it's important not to kind of judge it as hey, my proprietary version does this and this isn't able to do exactly the same things in exactly the same way. It's mostly about kind of coming at it with an open mindset and just thinking, what are the possibilities of this if more people get involved in developing it? How do I see this progressing as time goes on as well? So I think there's a lot of really interesting ideas in open source software, and NovaCut's a good example of that. And it's a very exciting kind of area to be looking at.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that you're kind of driving at there is sort of one's ability to trust their tools. And open source, like you said, it allows people to contribute changes to in sort of the direction that they would like to see it going, and it also allows in the worst case where a tool is going in a direction that doesn't work for you, that you can in the ultimate case kind of create your own version and have an alternate development path going that will meet your needs. And that's really in a lot of ways the main reason why we chose to take the open source route with NovaCut, other than just being fans of it in general, is because with that whole Final Cut situation, people could really only complain and switch if they could. Whereas and that's a big big step to just completely switch your tool.
People build their post-production offices, with thousands of dollars worth of equipment just around one piece of software or one kind of family of software. So it's that's a big move.
Yeah, where we wanted to make sure that artists could really truly trust that the software, if God forbid if NovaCut went under, or if
asteroid came down and wiped all
or if we somehow got infected with a brain virus and decided to be total douchebags and make NovaCut totally unusable. People could take our source code and find a good development team to put in whose hands they could entrust it, and it would continue. And So I think that's a really valuable element of open technologies, is that you always have that option. You can trust that it'll be around and it'll be improving. And I think you were mentioning about even if a certain tool isn't really ready today, that often as important as what it can do now, it's what it's going to be able to do in the future. Is it going to grow and keep up with you? Or is it going to always be that same thing that it is today, or is it going to adapt into something that's different? So you kind of have a matter of, is it evolving with you or against you?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point.
Yeah. Well, anyway, you're using videos. You'll be testing out video editors, but I think I guess that your main purpose in all of this is to really document where where open source is working and not, and what the challenges are and all that. And would you like to talk about how you plan to document and show your findings to the world?
Yeah, so I'm going to be doing. My original idea was basically to make a film. The classic kind of, like, I'll make a 90-minute film about open source or something like that, and then I realized that if you do that about a rapidly changing area of the world like open source, then by the time you've actually edited it, then it's out of date, basically. So I realized I needed to adapt that, use that kind of open source, release early, release often kind of idea, and use that with filmmaking as well. So rather than making one big chunk of a film and sending it off to festivals, rather I'm going to be doing at least one video per week. Some will be short, some will be long, some will be interviews, some serious, some funny, some ridiculous, and using a variety of various different techniques, basically whatever is the best technique to present the idea I'm dealing with. So whether that be a serious documentary approach or stop motion animation or whatever I feel like that particular week, that's how I'm going to be developing it. So hopefully that means that a wide range of different approaches and a wide range of different subjects, but basically having my story as a kind of a narrative all the way through, so tying all of these various different points into one kind of human story. So how does a person actually adapt to living open source as well?
Very cool. Now, before we get talking all day, it's an Indiegogo campaign, yes?
Yeah. So I'm still running that. We've got maybe 5 days left, something like that. I should probably know that. It's quite an unusual technique. I've never done it before, and so this is also part of that kind of. This is made for the internet and funded by the internet as well. So I'm running an Indiegogo campaign to raise money for this. So at the moment I'm just above $5,000 and looking for as much support as possible, of course, in this production. So yeah, I've been just trying to get the word out about that, and it's been fantastic, the response, in terms of all sorts of people really interested in my approach, or people who want to collaborate on projects, or people who have interesting ideas, interesting ways of dealing with particular problems that might come up in my life over the year. So it's been really wonderful, especially just meeting all of these interesting people who I might be working with over the year.
Yeah, cool. So what will the money being raised by the campaign, what will you be using it for during the course of the year?
The key thing for me is camera operators, because I can do a certain amount of filming of myself, but when I'm the subject and the camera operator, that's a little bit of a difficult situation. So I would quite often like to use camera operators, also taken from my documentary group as well, and I do want them to be able to eat as well. So I'm basically trying to earn some money to be able to pay people to help me out in the project. Some of it will go towards materials as well, if I want to, make a camera rig, or if I want to buy material to make an open source jacket or open source socks or something like that, then of course I need financial support to do that. But the main thing is definitely the people around me, because this is not something that one person can do all by themselves. I definitely need a lot of support for that. So if anyone is interested in helping me out with this project, do have a look at the video, which explains a lot more about the project, and that's indiegogo.com/year of open source.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and it's been good talking with you, and good luck with your campaign.
Thank you very much.